Chris, it's at your discretion. So if you
Okay.
want to give 1 more minute or 2 more minutes, up to you. You
Okay.
start.
Good deal. Yeah, showing 41 people in the group, so that's great. And some of us have already introduced ourselves and where we are and where we're located. I'm in North Carolina. We'll go ahead and get started. I see a lot of names on here that I recognize. It's a good group. A lot that I don't. So thank you for everybody who's joined us and going to be a part of this. My name is Chris Hips, and I'm the acting interim chair of the C2C interest group. This concept to consumer interest group was created to provide a forum for all of us to get together and discuss issues regarding creation of product from initial concept to the final consumer. There's been a lot of different speakers and initiatives over the years. I'll do the best that I can in the interim, and we'll see how this goes. And I want to thank Andrew for stepping up and doing our virtual session today. So it's going to be called Intro to Color Standards in Fashion. It's your session. Just a couple of housekeeping things here. We'll spend time at the end for answering any questions. So while Andrew is presenting from China, but while he's presenting, please mute your mics. If you have questions, please keep them till the end. And but you can certainly put any questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll make sure to get around to everyone. We have been asked to record the session, so if you don't want to be a part of that, mute your webcam, turn off your webcam and mute your mic, and you can participate however you would like to do that. So with that, I'm going to introduce Andrew Fraser. He is our president-elect of AATCC. He's currently the president of Textile Color and Sourcing Solutions. I've known Andrew a long time. A lot of us on the call have known him for a long time. You never know where he's going to be. It's like, where's Andrew? He's in China today, and it did sound like you're going to be there for a while. So enjoy being static for a little bit. I'm not sure how you'll adjust to that, but he works with multiple clients, including E-Dye Waterless Color System. We talked earlier, he has a BS in Textile Science from North Carolina State University, as do I. That's about all I'm going to say on that. We want to keep it fairly neutral given the environment that we're in with regard to basketball. But just a wealth of experience: Burlington Industries, Capital Mercury, VS, Walmart, Chico's, White House Black Market. It goes on. Boston Proper, UL, In Motion. So really today, he's going to share a wealth of experience, and he'll discuss color, lighting, and how A-squared AATCC test methods are essentials for brands, designers, and merchandisers, and anyone on this call. It's good to know, and really appreciate Andrew doing this. So I'll hand it over to him at this point.
Thanks, Chris. So Manisha is going to start the slide presentation. We tried this the other night, and I couldn't see what was happening on my side of the world, so she's gonna do this. Thank you for the introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I hope I get to meet you at some point during the next year. We've got a great Textile Summit coming up in October in Savannah, Georgia. Golf tournament, river boat dinner cruise. So it should be a good time, and a lot of panel discussions, not a lot of necessarily technical papers. So it should be a different format. Harry Scotes and I are bringing back the Textile Quiz Bowl. So look forward to that. So just, a plug for the summit in October. Talk about cold weather. Well, Savannah in October sounds really nice. So anyway, let's get started. Color is life in my world. I'm all in. My personal license plate in Arkansas is HUEMAN, which is human. Color man, because I've been doing it so long. but it really is the thing that draws people into an item or into a store is the color profile. And I work in the swimwear industry as one of my gigs, and everyone compares Target as being Target has the best color for swimwear. I think Target has a very good display of color, but that's how did they get there is kind of the thing. So we're going to talk just a little bit about that as we go through this. You should have the next slide, please. So instead of color, let's talk about black. And how do you define black? Right? And for those of you who know the answer to this, don't answer. But for some of the students, I would be curious to know if you can write in the chat how you define black. I think it's very interesting. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that for me, because I want to use your answers in one of the next talks that I do. Because we actually, a colleague and I, we were driving the other night, and we were talking about black, and we started laughing because it's. They went, yeah, that black looked really good in the car at night driving down the road. Well, actually, that's the definition of black: the absence of light. Right. So if you have no light, you have black, because for color you have to have an observer, an object, and a light source. So, and light matters drastically in how you see color. So that's just always something that I like to put out there first. And okay, so if you walk into a dark room, it's black because there's no light. So it's one of those quirky things that I'm a textile nerd and a color nerd, so just the way it is. Let's go on, Manisha, if you would, please. So the color journey, where did this color come from? And before we go to the next slide, I'll share some information with you that I got this week. So I'm working with a company that deals with the U.S. military, and they got rejected for some of their colors, some of their bulk. And I said, well, what's the standard? And they said, well, that's kind of the problem, because I guess the U.S. military keeps a roll of about 100 yards of bulk production, and they use that for continuing bulk production. But it could be 5 years old, it could be 10 years old, it could be 50 years old. But that's where they pull their color from. And I said, well, what light source do they use? Well, they use D75. Well, I haven't heard D75, and Steve, you probably have, but I haven't heard D75 used in almost 30 years. So, it's kind of interesting to me that.
Just very briefly, I've only heard it used with our U.S. military customers. So
it's interesting. So you have to have a color standard, you have to have a light source, and you have to have an observer. So even 40 years, 50 years, the U.S. military is still doing it the same way. They do everything visual. They don't use the spectrophotometer. They don't use QTX files. And who knows how consistent their roll of 100 yards of color is. So just think about that as we go to the next clip. Can anyone hear this? Manisha, we can't hear it.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me do something.
You might need to unmute yourself, Manisha, while you're playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I also forgot to include the sound. So let me redo this.
Where are the belts for this dress? Why is no one
Can you hear it?
ready?
Yes.
It's a tough call. They're so different.
Mm. Something funny?
No, nothing. You know, it's just that both those belts look exactly the same to me. You know, I'm still learning about this stuff and,
This stuff? Oh. Okay, I see. You think this has nothing to do with you. You go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back. But what you don't know is that that sweater is not just blue, it's not turquoise, it's not lapis, it's actually cerulean. And you're also blithely unaware of the fact that in 2002, Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns. And then I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, wasn't it, who showed cerulean military jackets? I think we need a jacket here.
Mm.
And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collections of 8 different designers. And then it filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents millions of dollars and countless jobs. And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
So one of my favorite movies and definitely a favorite clip of mine. So, you know, it kind of goes back to where does this color come from? So hence the military context that I learned about this week. And designers control a lot of this in going to shows and looking at trends and doing all this. And I'm not a designer, and I apologize for any designers that are on the call. It's just I'm a technical color person, and a color is a color to me, or at least in the same color family within a certain delta E. And that's how I look at color. That's how I think about color. Because for me, it's not about designing a color or picking a color. It's about executing that color and executing that color so that I don't have bleeding issues, I don't have fading issues, I don't have dye migration issues. So everyone has their different idea about a color and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So again, that's just it's a little levity to kind of start this thing off and talk about our process, which a lot of people think is broken. So the next slide is another one of my favorite clips, and it's not going to be a presentation on movie clips, but this is the other one.
What color would you say this is? It's pink, right? How about little pony here? I'm pink.
I'm looking for more than pink. I'm looking for luscious.
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 So you mean... What exactly do you mean?
Okay, I've said this before. You guys aren't hearing me. Luscious is more than a color. It's a state of mind. Like when you're on a Caribbean cruise and you've had at least 3 Mai Tais and you're flirting with a towel boy who looks like a cross between Javier Bardem and Brad Pitt. And you're having a perfect hair day. That's luscious. I'm just not feeling luscious. Have you ever eaten at the Ichigan restaurant in the Shijuku neighborhood of Tokyo? They've got a seared ahi tuna that is to die for. Make it look like that. It's like the inside of a baby polar bear's ear. It's like goosebumps on a Thursday. It's a nuclear accident, but there's no problem with it. It's like King Kong French kissed you. Stop it, Kong. Yeah. I want it to be so delish that you could just reach in there and bite it and eat it all up. Yep.
It's a brochure for a colostomy bag. Hey, guys! We're gonna need to send someone out for a bottle of Luscious. Right, we added Luscious. Lots and lots of Luscious.
That's it! Oh my gosh! Mwah! Thank you. Thank you so much. You're a good boy.
It was pink.
Okay, so again, a little levity, but that's how a lot of us feel sometimes. I got to be honest with you. So, you know, the process that current process that we go through when we do piece dyeing, we have color standard. We go to lab dip. We go to mini bulk, a bulk, and then the shave band. So the color standard is hugely important, as I said prior, because that's your communication of color in physical form, and then with the use of a spectrophotometer, pardon me, in a digital form. So this, you know, I had a boss who would look at me straight in the face and go, the standard is the standard is the standard. Do not change the standard. So a lot of the industry over the last 30 years, we've gotten really good at saying, okay, yeah, the standard is the standard, and the physical standard may change over time, kind of the whole military example that we talked about. So once we set the standard, we read the standard with the spectra. That information doesn't change. It stays the same until you change the standard. So we call that the master QTX file, right? So 25 years ago, you take that physical piece of color and you put it in a FedEx envelope and you ship it to China or Japan or wherever you're doing your production. And they would take up to 21 days to do lab dips and send it back to you and give you options of on your fabrication that you want, whether it's silk or polyester or cotton or a mixture of any of those, in a woven or in a knit or in a tricot or in a interlock, whatever it is. This is what it's going to look like. 21 days. Today, that same color standard or QTX file, you send it in an email. It's downloaded in the mill using the dye stuffs that mill uses. They do a color formulation on it, and they don't even have to dye it. They can actually make a QTX file and send it back to you as a predicted outcome of on that fabric with their dye stuffs. This is what the match is going to be. You can do it on a calibrated monitor. You can look at the numbers, but that can be done within minutes, not 21 days. So even though we're a very traditional industry, we've come a really long way in the last 30 years. So then we go to lab dip. So you go, yeah, I like this one. I like A. So they do a physical lab dip, and you go back and forth for weeks sometimes to get it right. But again, think about what we said at the beginning. You need a light source, you need an observer, and you need an object. So you have a color standard, and then now you have your lab dip, and you're looking at that visually or electronically. And you're happy with the lab dip, so now you have to go into bulk dyeing. Going from a laboratory into a dye house floor is a big shift. You're talking, 300 to 1,500 kilo machines, So that little lab dip that you did in the laboratory doesn't always translate to the production floor. So that's why we tend to do a mini bulk, is so that you're not putting a whole lot of yardage at risk in doing that. You can do, I think the machines are 10 to 50 kilos. So it gives you the ability to kind of translate that laboratory lab dip into bulk production. When you're happy with that bulk and the customer's happy with that bulk, you go into full bulk production, and then you monitor that production to make sure your die lots are staying within the parameters that your mill or your brand or your retailer give you. And those different lots are then considered shade bands. So you want to have a nice tight shade band so that when you're in a retailer, big box or brand, everything's consistent. And with March Madness going on, the way that I look at it is when they pan to the Duke crowd and the NC State crowd and the UNC crowd and the Iowa crowd, you see the different shades of the reds, of the blues. You see it, and it drives me nuts as a color person. It's like, why can't they get their color consistent? I actually to leave it like this. I actually missed a connection in Dallas one night, and a University of Arkansas ball player was on the flight, and we all ended up in the Waffle House because we were hungry, and they gave us vouchers. And I noticed that his top, and he was on the basketball team, and his top of his warm-ups was different than the bottom of his warm-ups. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, is your top from last season and your bottom from this season? He looked at me and went, yeah, how'd you know? I said, because they're different colors. So even internally, that's a thing. So consistency of color is really important. Let's go on to the next one. So the standard, the most important thing in your journey to get to a color that you want is your color standard. So up in the left-hand corner, Chico's and Taylor Loft, American Eagle, Lululemon, Nike, all retailers use color standards. And John Darcy from CSI and our Chroma and Pantone have done a really good job in selling what they call engineered standards these days. So the standard that you buy from an Archroma or a Coloro or a CSI are repeatable. So they'll have a master QTX file, but the physical pieces that you get are measured within a 0.5 delta E. So they're very, very consistent. So if you're mapping visually, you have a really good shot at making everything look good within the tolerance. If you're doing it electronically, you can send that QTX file out to 5 different mills in a matter of minutes on an email, and they can start the process that quickly. Some people wait for the physical. A lot of people go straight into formulation software and do that. But to have a color standard so that you can visually evaluate the color in a light box with a dedicated standardized light source. Okay, so for those of you that don't know about light boxes, D65 is to simulate daylight at sometime in the evening. I want to say it's at dusk or sunset, but it's a simulated light, but it's consistent. So meaning it's consistent in any of those boxes anywhere in the world, right? So same with cool white fluorescent, Chill 84, LED. LEDs, as long as your brand or your retailer identifies what light that is because there are so many LEDs out there. So basically what you want is you want to have that standard next to your lab dip or your bulk production in a light box that has exactly the same light source as I have sitting in Bentonville, Arkansas, or sitting in New York, or sitting in China. So light is very important. Color standards are very important. Next slide, please. So examples of piece-dyed lab dips. And this, I have to say, is probably the biggest waste of time that our process has. And generally, I say that because it goes anywhere from 3 weeks, in some cases 16 weeks. The prover will say, I don't like any of those, do it again. Well, in actuality, when it all comes down to it, they go back to the first one, which was the closest one that they did. They did in the first round. So an experienced colorist is really important, but having the right tools is really important so that you can make this decision as quickly as possible. And rule of thumb, if you go 3 rounds and you still haven't gotten approval, stop and figure out what's wrong. Do they have the correct standard? Do they have the correct light source? Do they have the correct light box? Because in 3 rounds, you should be able to come really close to hitting your target color. Next, please. Mini bulk, it's 1 roll of each color. It's generally what the industry calls sample yardage. It's something that represents the color family that you're trying to hit for your samples. To show a retailer or a brand, yes, we can do these variations of colors in the silhouette that you want, or they want a full run of all the silhouettes that you've put on your line sheet or your CADs. So again, and from a color standpoint, that's the smallest amount of yardage that you can do, and try and tweak your color from lab dip or laboratory into bulk production. Next, please. So this is something that I actually did, and this kind of goes back to designing intelligently. And I'm going to set this up for you. And I want to say that this was a color solution color, and it was in nylon only. And the customer wanted this in polyester because they wanted to do a top in nylon and a boy short or a board short for the beach in polyester. That's going to me. Okay, so 4 rounds, 4 dips first round, 8 dips second round, and you can see the visual difference. The one that's lighter is the CSI color standard in nylon, and all those dips are in polyester. So 12 lab dips at $117.76. That was $1,400, 2 rounds, and it took 20 days. Next, please. And then it goes on. So we're at round 4, 17 dips, $2,000, and 40 days. Next. Okay, now we're at another $706, another 2 rounds, another 20 days. Next. I think that was a dip slide. Yeah. So now we did another 18 lab dips at $2,100 in 30 days. Next. 8 dips, 1 round, another $1,000, another 10 days. Next. Another $1,000, another 30 days, 9 dips. Next. Another $2,300, 20 lab dips, Next. And this is the thing, not even CSI could match the nylon color that was dyed with acid dyes on polyester using dispersed dyes. So it's impossible in this case with this color, it was impossible to match this color on polyester, and that's going to happen sometimes. But you have to listen. If you're in a position where you're saying do it again and do it again and do it again, you have to listen to your experts to go, this is the closest you're going to get. You're not going to get any closer. So I think the next one has my totals. Nope. Backup one. So this whole exercise, I want to say I spent $16,000 in doing all these lab dips to prove the point. And it was like 120 days that we spent doing this. But sometimes you have to do this to show your customer or your brand this is impossible to do. It's just not going to happen. So even the guys that made the standard, that's as close as they could come to that color in polyester, because you have to understand the dye classes. Nylon uses acid dye, polyester uses dispersed dyes, and sometimes you just can't get a match. So for the designers, understand that up front. And if you want the top and the bottom to match, maybe you have to do the top and the bottom in only nylon or only polyester so that you have a really good match, or do a contrasting color. Don't do a matchy. Do a black board short. Because that blue and nylon and a black would look really good together, right? So you don't always have to have a match, but that's an example of the time that it took and the cost that it took. And if you're working with a mill and you go to that extreme, and I know I was extreme on that. I really wanted to prove the point that sometimes you just can't get there. Okay. And one of the reasons, and not this was a technical issue that just it couldn't happen. But one of the biggest things that I have found in the 30 years of doing this is the next slide. Those are pieces of color standards and pictures that I've taken, and this is over the last 6 years, of that's what showed up in the dye house. So the dyer, the poor dyer, this is what he had to match those colors. They didn't have a QTX file. And that nice color standard you saw several slides back, that's what they got out of that color standard. Some of those, and I didn't put on there, I typically take a pen and I lay it on the sheet and take the picture so you can see the scale. But that's about a quarter. The second one from the left is about a quarter of a postage stamp. The next one to it is barely big enough for the tip of a pen. So how are you supposed to match a color with that? That's just being ridiculous. And these are real examples. These are not made up. These are what was in the dye house. So if I can impart anything on you, it would be don't cut color standards. When I went to work for one of my clients, this is what they were doing. These were actually theirs. And I convinced them, if you buy the appropriate amount of color standards full, do not cut them, and you get them into your dye house, your color approval issues will go away. And sure enough, once we started providing all the offices with, at that time, I think it was four or five color standards of every color, and they got them out to their dye houses. Their approval process, it went from 40% up to 95%. So it's a huge difference to give somebody the tools to make them successful. Yes, the color standard is $17. You know what an air shipment is? $250 to $1 million. I'd rather spend the $17, because if you're late and you have to hit a delivery and you have to put it on a plane, your profit is gone. That's $1 million mistake in some cases. So don't cheap out and cut your color standards. Actually supply the dye house and your printer and your trim suppliers with the appropriate color standards so that they can be successful. Next, please. And again, this is why our Chroma and CSI, Pantone, Coloro, this is why they give you those nice big swatches. And I know Coloro you can cut in half, and I know Pantone you can cut in half. That's it. But generally, an acceptable color standard is 2x8 folded once, because it's double ply. They're mounted where they separate from the card, because a lot of times those cards have a UV in them. So you don't want to measure that UV. You don't have that UV back on when you're looking at color. So if you have a light box and you have a UV light and you take a color standard that's got a white or any backing on it, and you put it and you hit the UV light, what you'll see is the UV fluorescing through that color. So even in a light box, even in D65 or U35 or U30 or whatever light source you have, there's still some UV light that is causing you to see that color standard differently. So your little chiclets for design, where you do your palette, guarantee if you take one of the chiclets and put it in that light box and turn on the UV, you will see it fluoresce. So just these are some of the tricks to make sure that the color that you pick, and when you're evaluating color, you're looking at a pure color standard and you're looking at a pure lab dip. And a lot of times I do it anyway, even on dark colors. I put the standard and I put the lab dip in the light box and I hit the UV. And surprise, surprise, the lab dip has UV in it. So these are the things that will kind of cause you the pitfalls, but these are the size of the color standards. Do not cut them. Next, please. Don Darcy was my color mentor for a long time, him and Nelson Hauser. But John always said, inspect what you expect. And it's so true. Do not assume that your dye house or your overseas office is doing what you think they're doing. You know, a lot of people say, well, do you have a light box? Yes, we have light box. Do you have D65? Yes, we have D65. Do you have CWF? Yes, I have CWF. And still the lab that's come in and they look horrible and they go, no, it looked really good, So what I found also is you have to define your light box and you have to define your light source. So it can't just be CWF, it's CWF of a certain brand, right? So what I asked, because COVID really stopped the international travel, I said, well, take a picture of your light box. And what you'll see is it's a Taiwanese light box, it's a Chinese light box, it's a homemade light box, it's everything under the sun. And every light source has a power distribution curve, spectrum, curve. So it's the fingerprint of that light source. So that's why a lot of us old guys say you got to have a certain light box. You got to have, X-ray, or you have to have a data color. You have to have whatever the light box is that your brand or your retailers are indicating for you to have, because if you're consistent in your light boxes and you're consistent in the bulbs that go on those light boxes, you eliminate another variable in your color journey or your color approval journey, right? So you take all that, you take all the crap away, and you're left with dyeing. You're left with your how you do your lab dip, how you do your color formulation. Is it a dye stuff situation that you're dealing with? There's a color and it's a one dye color, and it's effing blue. And I'm not talking the bad word. It is made with a dye called F-N-blue. Hardest color I've ever had to match. So and there, your dye houses aren't going to go to Dye Star or Chroma, or they're going to use Chinese dye stuffs. They're going to use Japanese dye stuffs. They're going to use Taiwanese dye stuffs. So the color standard that you give them, unless they go to Dye Star or to Chroma and say, hey, I've been doing this for 8 weeks, I can't get this color, I need your dye. And some retailers and brands do that. But in the meantime, you're trying to get that color as close as you can. Make sure that you have the right color standard, you have the right light source. Those two things, if you're certain about, then you tie into what you're actually trying to do, which is match that color the best you can within a certain tolerance. Next, please. Make sure your mill or your fabric supplier has a working certified spectrum. They need annual certifications. A lot of the big box retailers require annual certifications and accreditation before you're allowed to actually submit color. So the two AATCC evaluation procedures are listed here. EP6 for instrumental color measurement, and EP7, the assessment of change in color of a test specimen. So if you're a student, your student chapter should have a testing manual, either on a USB or a physical manual. I'm an old guy. I like that book on my desk because it's easy for me to reference. But that kind of ties into, we have certain standard operating procedures that we use to be consistent, whether it's on Spectra, next slide, please, or whether it's in a light box. So EP9 and EP8. EP9 is the assessment of color difference in textiles visually. So that's a spectral light QC. And it's a standardized light box. It has standardized light sources. So AATCC EP9 and EP8, 9-step chromatic transference scale. That would be for if you were doing color testing, and you have the ability to kind of see what your ratings are, right? So number one, you got to get the color right. Number two, then you got to make sure it doesn't bleed, fade, or dye migrate. So that's the transference scale, because you have to actually, the lab, not you, but the lab will rate that. So you're super excited. You've got the color down. It went into bulk production, and you go to do your production testing, and you have a failure. And you're like, well, but I matched the color. Yeah, but you're bleeding, and you're fading, and you're dye migrating. So it's this balance. It's not just about color, it's about performance as well. So every decision that you make as a colorist, or as a merchant, or as a designer, all this has to be in the back of your mind to say it's, and this hurts me to say, it's not all just about color, right? You have to be able to execute that color within the parameters that your brand or your retail gives you from a technical performance specification. You can have the greatest pink in the world, but if it bleeds all over the place, it's not worth it. And let me tell you, I've been in companies where they didn't pay attention to that. I have bought sofas, I have bought car seats, I have bought rugs, because the crocking rubbed off on the seats, off the sofa, and on the carpet, and we had to replace them. So it's a big deal. So again, just keep this in the back of your mind when you're thinking about, oh, I really like that nice bright color, and you can have it, but you're not going to have it without some issues. Next, please. The other thing On those big light boxes, they have a glass plate that swings down so you can change the light bulbs. That is a dust magnet. So open it up and wipe your hand across it and look at your hand. And if you don't clean it once a month, your hand's going to be black from all the dust in there. So even if you have the right standard, even if you have the right light source, even if you have the right light box, if you have dust preventing that light from coming through into your cabinet, you're still not going to have the right color. So it's something, again, people don't think about. But if you go into a mill and you're having trouble with color approval, take that, bring it down, and see if they're cleaning their diffuser plate. Next, please. So insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I think the case study kind of proves that. I went to the extreme and I spent a lot of money and a lot of time where I was doing the same thing over and over again. And as you saw, I didn't get the result that I wanted. So Albert and I are good friends. Next, please. Why do we follow a broken process? Because we're afraid to go outside the box and think outside the box. So do something different. If it's not working, do something different. Be a detective. Get out there and understand why you're not getting what you want. And we've got about 10 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Andrew. It's good stuff there. A lot of it just comes down to the fundamentals, doesn't it? Over and over again, making sure that you're following the processes and removing as many variables as possible and understanding the implications of a lot of those variables. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Andrew, I got a lot of good information for teaching. Are all these things that you talked about, what kind of light box, things like that, are they included on a spec sheet, or is this separate from what like buyers or planners who are working with vendors for products that they're going to carry in their stores? Is there a separate spec sheet for some of these things?
Yeah, actually, every brand or retailer should have their own color manual. So it will say what color standard producer they use. So, like, for instance, because I know a lot about Walmart. Walmart uses Color Solutions International. They use some other producers for spot colors and prints and things like that they can't find elsewhere. They'll use a Pantone or an Archroma or a Coloro. So every brand, like JCPenney's typically will use Archroma. Target will use Archroma and some Coloro. It just depends on that retailer or that brand. I would love to get into the NCAA and set up color standards for all of the college teams, so that we don't get that top and bottom difference between seasons. But yeah, everyone has their own color manual or spec sheet that if you're working with them, they should be able to provide you. Generally, it's an electronic form PDF. Great question, Lee. Thanks.
Andrew's right there. Most brands that have a formal color process have documented that, and they've put all of those specifications in the color manual, from what spectra to use, what light source to use, what light box, how frequently to have them calibrated, how to train the employees, what settings to use. So a lot of that is really documented. And if it's not documented, then you don't know what you're getting, right? You don't know exactly what they're doing. So one of the first steps is just to start writing down how you evaluate color And then you can at least share, because you're trying to have the mill across the world make the same decisions that you're making or that you would make. That's how you streamline communication. And Andrew's right. One of the ways of doing that is really documenting exactly what the expectations are.
And if they don't share it, go back to them and ask them. Right. I need to know your light source. I need to know which light box you use. I need to know where your color standards are coming from, so I can get my own.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you really haven't defined the color until you define the light source that you're going to evaluate it under. So there's a question that came in, or somebody has their hand up.
Yes, this is Jessica Brooks. I had a quick question. I'm dealing with two suppliers who both have calibrated light booths. I verified. I also had the suppliers go visit each other because we need it to match. And they both verified that their light booths were calibrated. They're both looking in D65. What expectation is there, or what, I guess, what other variables are there to show that they both are seeing a color difference between them? Like they said that the supplier's telling me that there should be an expectation of some color difference between a verified and an X-rate, but I said no, right? Like it's a standard light source. It should be matching, especially if it's calibrated, if you're checking like the luminosity. What other variables and what other things could you look for to determine that difference and why there's a difference?
You want me to take it?
So I can comment briefly. So what you really need to see is what the spectral power distribution is of each of the light sources. I mean, Andrew mentioned that earlier. So the lumen value or the color temperature or even the chromaticity, D65, isn't enough. Have them send you the spectral power distribution of each of the light sources.
Perfect.
Because even within the X-rate family, you've got the judge and you've got the QC. Right? You've got the Spectralite QC and you've got the Judge QC. The Judge QC has a tube D65. The Spectralite has a xenon arc light source. Their power distribution curves are totally different.
Yep. Okay. Got it. That's perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Somebody asked a question here, I think related to the same question, and it was, would pH levels in their waters make difference? So I think that question is related to what are some of the reasons why, if there is true color differences happening, what are some of the variables that impact that? And I don't know all the variables, but you're in a good place to ask those questions. Most of us, Andrew and other folks that have been around A squared, have seen the fishbone diagram that shows what all of the variables are that go into shade variation. And it really is everything down to pH levels of water, the hardness of the water. Sometimes it changes in seasons. You know, when you have leaves fall and the hardness changes and the organic matter of water changes. So there's tons of variables that could make the difference in the actual color that you're seeing. As far as the evaluation goes, I think you're on the right track here, which is really controlling the variables that are in place for the evaluation. And part of that is the spectral power distribution of those.
Yeah, I was in a mill 20 years ago in Thailand, and they used their water source was an artesian well. And throughout the year, the water changed because of exactly what you were saying, Chris. The organic matter changed, and they couldn't repeat the same color in the summer that they could in the wintertime.
So it's real. We had the same issue because of leaves. Yeah. It was New England,
right? Yep.
Because of all the leaves, we had to prove it to the military why we were failing pH.
Yep.
Well, we're very close to the end. If anyone has any questions, certainly we'll have some follow up with who the presenters are and some people from A Squared that can help connect you with some additional resources. I should now, yeah, here we go. So let's get back to, so upcoming A Squared education, speaking of different resources, there's a lot of opportunities to learn more, both about color, about testing, about the topics that you see here. The next virtual is utilizing 3D digital technologies in apparel design and research. The Functional Fabrics Fair, A Squared Testing Standards exhibition will be there in Portland. There's a PFAS conference in Raleigh. And there is, if color management and these types of things are interesting to you, there's a color management workshop at the A Squared Technical Center in August. And Andrew usually participates there. I participated last time. It's a great place to get some hands-on. There's breakout sessions there and presentations much like what Andrew gave here. And I know some of you in the audience have actually attended that last year too. So that's an opportunity. And then the Textile Discovery Summit, which Andrew was mentioning earlier in Savannah, and the opportunity, I think you said, Andrew, it's going to be more panel discussion oriented and really interactive for the folks that come to that. So, and we have our great staff at A Square that are available for any questions or connections to those that would have the answers. So here's 3 of them, Maria, Manisha, and Josie. There's also Matthew, Erica, and Diana, all available to you. And really the organization is great, a great resource, and it's here to support you. So just one last little thing that Jessica put in the chat. There's a Delaware Valley section, an Evening of Color in Philadelphia, coming up on April 17th. So there's details on LinkedIn. And yeah, I think we can call it a day. Andrew can't call it a day yet, but he's still got the rest of the day there. And some of those on the West Coast here still have some time in their day. But thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the participation. Andrew, really appreciate you stepping in and doing it this time. Thumbs up. I think it was a great learning for everyone. So with that,
thank you, appreciate it. Chris, I did put my email address up there on the chat. If anyone has any questions, that's the easiest way to get me right now.
Got it. Very good. Okay. Well, everyone have a great day, great evening, and we'll see you next time.